They saw smooth turf, smoother and brighter than Jill had ever seen before, and blue sky, and darting to and fro things so bright that they might have been jewels or huge bugs. Although she had been longing for something like this, Jill felt frightened. She looked at Scrub's face and saw that he was frightened too. "Come on, Pole," he said in a breathless voice. "Can we get back? Is it safe?" asked Jill. At that moment a voice shouted from behind. A spiteful little voice. "Now then, Pole," it squeaked. "Everyone knows you're here. Down you come." It was the voice of Edith Jackal, not one of them herself, but one of her hangers-on and tale-bearers. "Quick!" said Scrub. "Here, hold hands. We mustn't get separated." And before she quite knew what was happening, he grabbed her hand and pulled her through the door, out of the school grounds, out of England, and out of our whole world into that place. The sound of Eagle... Sorry about that. The sound of Edith Jackal's voice stopped as suddenly as the voice on the radio when it is switched off. Instantly there was quite a different sound all about them. It came from those bright things overhead, which now turned out to be birds. They were making a righteous noise, but it was much more like music, rather advanced music which you don't quite take in at the first hearing, than bird songs ever are in our world. Yet in spite of the singing, there was a sort of background of immense silence. That silence, combined with the freshness of the air, made Jill think that they must be on the top of a very high mountain. Scrub still had her by the hand, and they were walking forward, staring about them on every side. Jill saw that huge trees, rather like cedars but bigger, grew in every direction. But as they did not grow close together, and as there was no undergrowth, this did not prevent one from seeing a long way into the forest to left and right. And as far as Jill's eye could reach, it was all the same. Level turf, darting birds with yellow or dragony blue, or rainbow plumage, white shadows and emptiness. There was not a breath of wind in that cool, bright air. It was a very lonely forest. Right ahead there were no trees, only blue sky. They went straight on without speaking, till suddenly Jill heard Scrub say, "Look out!" and felt herself jerked back. They were at the very edge of a cliff. Jill was one of those lucky people who have had a good head for heights. She didn't mind in the least standing on the edge of a precipice. She was rather annoyed with Scrub for pulling her back. "Just as if I was a kid," she said, and she wrenched her hand out of his. When she saw how very white he had turned, she despised him. "What's the matter?" she said, and to show that she was not afraid, she stood very near the edge indeed, in fact, a good deal nearer than even she liked. Then she looked down. She now had realized that Scrub had some excuse for looking white, for no cliff in our world is to be compared with this. Imagine yourself at the top of the very highest cliff you know, and imagine yourself looking down into the very bottom, and then imagine that the precipice goes on below that, as far again, 10 times as far, plenty times as far. And when you've looked down all that distance, imagine little things that might at first glance be mistaken for sheep, but presently you realize that they are clouds. Not the wreaths of mist, but the enormous white puffy clouds, which are themselves as big as most mountains. And at last, in between those clouds, you get your first glimpse of the real bottom. So far away that you can't make it out whether it's field or wood, or land or water, farther below those clouds than you are above them. Jill stared at it. Then she thought that perhaps, after all, she would take a step back a foot or so from the edge, but then she didn't take for fear what Scrub would think. Then she suddenly decided that she didn't care what he thought, as she would jolly well get away from that horrible edge and never laugh at anyone for liking heights again. But when she tried to move, she found she couldn't. Her legs seemed to have turned into putty. Everything was swimming before her eyes. "What are you doing, Paul? Come back, you blithering little idiot!" shouted Scrub, but his voice seemed to be coming from a long way off. She felt him grabbing at her, but now she had no control over her own arms and legs. There was a moment struggling on the cliff edge. Jill was too frightened and dizzy to know what quite she was doing, but the two things she remembered as long as she lived, they often came back to her in dreams. One was that she had wrenched herself free of Scrub's clutches, and the other was that, at the same moment, Scrub himself, with a terrified scream, had lost his balance and gone hurling into the depths. Fortunately, she was given no time to think over what she had done. Some huge, brightly colored animal had rushed to the edge of the cliff. It was lying down, leaning over, and this was the odd thing, blowing. Not roaring or snorting, but just blowing from its wide open mouth, blowing out as steadily as a vacuum cleaner sucks in. Jill was lying so close to the creature that she could feel the breath vibrating steadily through its body. She was lying still because she couldn't get up. She was nearly fainting. Indeed, she wished she could really faint, but faints don't come back for the asking. At last she saw, far away below her, a tiny black speck floating away from the cliff and slightly upwards. As it rose, it also got farther away. By the time it was nearly on a level with the cliff top, it was so far off that she lost sight of it. It was obviously moving away from them at a great speed. Jill couldn't help thinking that the creature by her side was blowing it away. So she turned and looked at the creature. It was a lion.